Well, good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name's Richard Cruz, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Flying Officer Matthew Duras. We warmly welcome the family of Private James Clarence Johnson, whose story will be told shortly. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria and RSL Queensland, who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. And during this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you're able, I invite you all to please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts, all beauty rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains that let us sing, advance Australia fair.
If you're able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths and floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private James Clarence Johnson. James Johnson was born in 1887, the third of 7 children born to William and Margaret Johnson of Rushworth, Victoria. Known as Jimmy to his family and friends, he attended a local state school at Rushworth and later worked as a manager in a grocery department at a local store. He was also a member of the Rushworth Brass Band. Johnson volunteered to join the Australian Imperial Force on the 17th of August 1914, just weeks after the beginning of the First World War. He soon began training with the 7th Infantry Battalion, one of the first units to be raised in Australia when the war began. After a little over 2 months of training at camps at Moonee Ponds and Broadmeadows, Johnson and the 7th Battalion sailed from Melbourne as a part of the first convoy of Australian troops to depart Australia for overseas service. In early December 1914, after a brief stopover in Albany, Western Australia, they arrived in Egypt to continue their training. In Egypt, Johnson joined B Company of his battalion, and he drew on his experience in playing in the Rushworth Brass Band to serve as one of his unit's buglers. In February 1915, Johnson was transferred with his unit from Egypt to the Greek island of Lemnos, where they prepared for the upcoming attack on the Turkish forces in the Dardanelles. Johnson and the 7th Battalion were among a second wave of Anzac troops to land in Gallipoli in the early hours of the 25th of April 1915. As he and the troops of B Company rode towards their landing site, they came under fire from Turkish rifles and machine guns. Once ashore, they took up a position behind a sandbank under enemy fire and eventually managed to occupy some forward Turkish trench positions. However, that afternoon, a Turkish counterattack pushed them back to the beach. They had suffered heavy casualties. On the 6th of May, less than 2 weeks after the initial landing at Anzac Cove, Johnson and the 7th Battalion moved to Cape Helles, on the tip of the Gallipoli Peninsula, to assist in a major British attack aimed at the town of Krithia. On the 8th of May 1915, during what has become known as the Second Battle of Krithia, Johnson and his unit were moving forward from a series of support lines to the frontline trenches. As they advanced across the open country between the lines, they came under heavy Turkish high explosives and shrapnel artillery fire. Johnson was killed during the advance towards the firing line. One report states that he was seen to have been seriously wounded by an artillery explosion during the advance, and as he crawled away to seek help, he was seen to be struck once again by artillery fire. In the chaos and confusion of the fighting at Gallipoli, Johnson was originally reported as wounded, and his family back home in Australia received news that he had been shot in the shoulder, had recovered in hospital, and had returned to the lines in June. However, not long after reading in the newspapers that he had returned to the lines, they received news from the soldiers who had returned home to Rushworth that Johnson had been killed. This news seemed to be confirmed by a letter of condolence from a chaplain who had served with Johnson at the front. Desperate for news as to his fate, Johnson's family wrote frantically to the authorities for clarification. It was not until January 1916 that they received confirmation that he had been killed on the 8th of May 1915. After weeks after hearing of their brother's death, Johnson's younger brothers, Harold and Rupert, enlisted in the army. They served for the rest of the war on the Western Front. James Clarence Johnson was 28 years old and has no known grave. On hearing the confirmation of his death, his grieving family left many messages of condolences in the local newspapers. In one, they left the following poem: "One of the best, a loving son, a brother kind and true, so dearly loved, so sadly missed by everyone he knew." His name is listed on the Helles Memorial in Turkey, where there are the names of over 20,000 soldiers from the First World War who have no known grave. Private James Clarence Johnson's name is listed on the Roll of Honour to my right, amongst almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. In the photograph displayed today beside the pool of reflection, Private James Clarence Johnson can be seen standing in the centre of the back row. This is but one of many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private James Clarence Johnson, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, in the hope of a better world.
If you're able, please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes this evening's last post ceremony. We thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.